The first thing I remember about that night is the sound of glass. Slow, fragile, final. It wasn't loud. Just a soft crack that sliced through the hum of the museum's heating vents. I turned toward the sound, brush in hand, the smell of varnish and linseed oil hanging heavy in the air. My gloves were sticky with resin. My reflection swam faintly in the fractured surface of the painting I'd spent 6 weeks restoring. It was 2:17 a.m. I knew because the wall clock had been ticking louder than usual. The Z kind of sound you only notice when you've been alone too long. Reykjavik slept outside, wrapped in snow and silence. I worked best in hours like these, when the world thinned and nothing existed but me, the canvas, and the ghosts beneath it. The painting was from 1893. A portrait of a woman in mourning black, pearls around her throat, eyes too alive for someone so long dead. It had come in damaged from a private estate, supposedly owned by a descendant of the Linton family. My family. The coincidence was almost funny. Almost. I'd been told my surname was a common one. Still, the curator had smirked when she handed me the file. Maybe she's your great-great-grandmother, I'd smile back politely. The kind of smile that hides more than it shows. Because if there's one thing I've learned, family jokes are never just jokes. The crack widened as I ran my gloved thumb along the frame's gilded edge. A tiny piece of plaster fell away, landing near my boot. I crouched to pick it up, and that's when I saw it. A sliver of paper wedged deep inside the hollow space behind the frame's molding. Old, brittle, folded twice. It shouldn't have been there. I hesitated, glancing at the door. The security camera's red light blinked rhythmically, its unblinking eye sweeping the room. No one else would be in the conservation wing at this hour. I pulled off my gloves, careful not to tear the paper as I eased it free. The parchment was yellowed, edges crumbling like ash. My name was written across the front. Not Aria Linton, though, just Aria, and beneath it, a date. June 3rd, 1996, my chest tightened. That was the day I was born. The air felt suddenly too thin. The hum of the vents sharpened to a hiss. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper, the faint smell of cedar and old paint rising from it. A scent that hit something deep in my memory, something I couldn't name. The letter was short, written in looping ink that bled slightly through the fibers. If you're reading this, they never told you. You were never meant to be theirs. Find the house on Uxarfjordur Bay. Under the floorboards, you'll find the rest of the truth. I read it twice. Then again, slower, tracing the final initial like it might burn me. LL for Linton. L for lie? My throat went dry. I sat there on the cold tile floor, letter trembling in my hand, trying to remember anything from my childhood that might explain this. A face, a voice, a sound. But all I could recall were fragments. The sharp scent of disinfectant from my mother's clinic, the low hum of my father's record player, the way they never spoke about before. Before what? A soft gust rattled the windows. Snow whispered against the glass like static. The room felt heavier, the shadows taller. For the first time in years, I was afraid to be alone. I slipped the letter into my coat pocket just as the door opened. Aria? It was Christian, the night guard. His breath fogged the air. You're still here? It's past 2. Couldn't sleep, I said, forcing a small smile. Just wanted to finish this section. He nodded, glancing at the cracked glass. Looks like the paintings had enough for tonight. Yeah, I whispered. Maybe we both have. When he left, I turned off the lights, locking the lab behind me. Outside, the snow was thick enough to swallow my footsteps. The letter pressed against my ribs like a heartbeat. The street lamps buzzed faintly overhead, halos in the falling white. Reykjavik looked washed clean, innocent, but I knew better. By the time I reached my apartment, my fingers were numb. I laid the letter on the kitchen table, staring at the ink until the words blurred. You were never meant to be theirs. The radiator clanged once, a hollow metallic sound that echoed through the room. I thought of the woman in the portrait, her knowing eyes, her faint smile, the pearls like tiny teeth around her throat. Who had she been? And what had she known about me? That night, I dreamed of a house by the sea, black waves crashing against stone, a single window glowing in the dark. I woke just before dawn, heart pounding, salt on my tongue. When the sun rose, I packed a small bag, printed a map, and circled the name written in the letter. Uxarfjordur Bay, a place I'd never heard of. A place waiting to tell me who I really was. The next morning began gray, the kind of color that doesn't belong to sky or sea, just the space in between. Reykjavik felt smaller than usual, as if it already knew I was leaving. I packed only what would fit in a canvas duffel. Notebook, gloves, a thermos, the folded letter sealed inside a plastic sleeve. The roads north weren't forgiving this time of year. The news said the storms along the eastern fjords had cut power to half the coast, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Some instinct, the old animal kind, kept whispering that if I waited, the courage would rot. Before sunrise, I stood by my car in the museum's empty lot, the air burning my lungs. My breath drifted in small white ghosts. When I turned the key, the engine coughed like an old smoker before settling into a low rumble. The letter lay on the passenger seat. Its presence felt human, almost alive. I drove past the sleeping city, shuttered bakeries, dim apartment blocks, a man walking his dog in a parka too big for him. The streets gleamed with a thin layer of ice, every traffic light haloed in fog. As the highway curved out toward the north, Reykjavik's lights fell away behind me. The radio caught static, then silence. For hours. It was just the hum of the engine, the hiss of tires on wet asphalt, and the endless, pale emptiness of Icelandic winter. At the first petrol stop, a lone station perched beside a fjord that looked more like a bruise than water, I filled the tank and bought coffee that tasted faintly of burnt sugar. The attendant, a young woman with wind-cracked lips, watched me too long when I paid. "You're heading north?" she asked. "Yes. Family up there?" "Maybe," I said. She smiled politely, but her eyes shifted. "Weather's turning. Be careful on the Uxarfjordur route. That road remembers things. Old stories. You'll see." She said it like a warning or a wish. I couldn't tell which. The wind picked up when I left. The car shuddered as gusts rolled down from the mountains, waves of white sweeping across the road like ghosts crossing a threshold. I tightened my grip on the wheel, knuckles pale. At the base of a ridge, a sign appeared half buried in snow. Uxarfjordur, 28 kilometers. That was the first time I felt it. The sensation of being watched. Not by anyone visible, but by the land itself. The cliffs rose like black teeth, and the sea crashed below, salt spray freezing mid-air. I could smell it through the vents. Cold, iron, memory. I stopped once just to breathe. The silence outside was total. The kind that makes your pulse sound louder than wind. Somewhere far off, a raven called. When I reached the bay, dusk had already begun its slow collapse. The sky bruised into violet and ash. Small cottages dotted the shoreline, most of them dark, their roofs heavy with snow. I followed the GPS until it stuttered, then died. No signal, no map. Only the letter's words echoing in my head. Find the house on Uxarfjordur Bay. The road ended at a gate half hidden under drifted snow. The fence beyond it leaned with age, and behind that, a shape. The house. It sat at the edge of the sea, weather-beaten and gray, its windows clouded with salt. One shutter hung crooked, creaking with each gust. The air smelled of kelp and rust. I killed the engine and stepped out. The cold hit like a slap. Each step toward the porch sounded too loud. Snow crushed beneath my boots, the only proof I still existed. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale with dust and something faintly metallic, the scent of forgotten things. My flashlight beam caught fragments: a broken chair, a child's shoe, a fireplace filled with driftwood long turned to ash. On the mantel sat a photograph, its glass cracked. A woman, the same woman from the painting, holding a baby swaddled in a wool blanket. The background was this house. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I brushed the dust away from the frame. On the back, written in that same looping hand, Aria, 1996, my vision blurred. I steadied myself against the wall, breath shallow. Lightning flashed through the windows, followed by distant thunder rolling over the bay. The storm the attendant had warned about was arriving. Under the floorboards, you'll find the rest of the truth. The floor groaned as I knelt near the fireplace. The wood was warped but not rotten. My flashlight caught a faint seam, a line that didn't match the others. I dug my nails into it, prying until a loose plank lifted with a dull crack. Beneath it, a small metal box wrapped in oilcloth. The clasp was rusted shut. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room as I forced it open. Inside lay a stack of letters, brittle photographs, and a thin leather book with initials pressed into the cover. A.L. my initials. Hands trembling, I opened the first page. The handwriting was neater than the letter in the frame, but it carried the same looping signature, L. To whoever she becomes, if she ever finds this, I need you to know why I left. They took you from me before I could speak your name aloud. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Outside, the wind screamed against the house, but inside, all I could hear was my own breathing, shallow, disbelieving, alive. I kept reading until the lantern flickered out. The last line of the journal stopped my breath entirely. The woman you call mother is not who she says she is. She was paid to keep you hidden, and now they'll come for you, just as they came for me. My body went cold. Every sound in the house sharpened. The moan of wood, the drip of melting snow, a single creak from upstairs. I wasn't alone. Someone, had moved. I closed the box, rose slowly, and turned off my flashlight. Darkness wrapped around me like a second skin. Then, from the staircase above, a voice I hadn't heard in years whispered my name. Aria. The voice came soft at first, too soft for logic to accept. Aria! It slid through the dark like a current of air, gentle but wrong. I froze, one hand still resting on the floorboard, the other clutching the flashlight that I dared not switch on. The storm outside pressed against the windows, the wind howling like something alive. For a long moment, I told myself it was the house, old beams shifting, wind slipping through cracks, my own mind tangled in the echo of what I'd just read. But then I heard it again, closer. Aria, don't be afraid. The flashlight trembled in my grip. I rose slowly, my knees stiff from kneeling. My breath came short and visible, a pale mist in the cold. Every sound stretched. The creak of the boards, the faint tap of loose shutters. Someone was upstairs. The staircase loomed in the half-light from the storm, each step worn smooth by time. I'd never believed in ghosts, but belief is a fragile thing. It bends easily when you're standing in a stranger's house, holding a letter that rewrote your life. Who's there? My voice cracked as I said it. Silence. Then another sound. A footstep. I clicked on the flashlight. Its beam wavered up the stairs, catching only dust and the edge of a railing carved with small, curling motifs, the kind my mother used to draw in the margins of her notebooks when she thought no one was watching. I started climbing. Each step answered with a creak like a breath drawn in warning. At the landing, a door hung ajar. Light spilled through the crack, a faint yellow glow pulsing like candlelight. My throat tightened. I pushed it open. The room beyond was small, the ceiling low. A single oil lamp burned on the table, its flame flickering under the draft. And there, in the middle of the room, sat a woman, older than I remembered but unmistakable, my mother. Except, no. The woman I'd called mother had pale hair, always tied back, and eyes the color of cold glass. This woman's hair was dark, streaked with silver, and her eyes, my eyes, were the exact shade of storm water before rain. She smiled faintly, as if she'd been waiting a long time for me to arrive. I was afraid you wouldn't come. My mouth went dry. Who are you? You already know. I don't. She tilted her head. You read the letter. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavy with dust and something older. The faint, sweet smell of cedar and old smoke. I could hear the sea outside, the slow rhythm of waves hitting rock. You wrote it? I asked. She nodded once. Before they found me, I didn't move closer. Found you? Who? Her gaze drifted toward the window, where the storm blurred everything into white. The ones who bought silence. The ones who decided which stories were safe to tell. I tried to swallow, but my throat locked. You mean my parents? A sad smile crossed her face. They were never parents. They were caretakers of a secret they didn't understand. I wanted to scream, to demand names and dates and reasons. But my voice betrayed me. What did they take from you? She reached into her coat and pulled out a small silver locket, tarnished and dented. She slid it across the table. Inside was a photograph, a baby wrapped in a wool blanket, a woman holding her. Not the portrait woman this time. Me. You were mine, she said softly. Until they decided you shouldn't be. Lightning flashed, painting her face in silver. The wind howled, and for a second I saw the years written across her skin. Not age, but exile. Why? I whispered. Because of who your father was. The air seemed to still around that word. Father. She leaned forward, eyes shining. He wasn't the man they told you. He wasn't a doctor. He was an archaeologist, and he found something they wanted buried. Something beneath the old bay. What did he find? Her gaze dropped to the floor. Proof of what? She hesitated, then said the word like it could still hurt her. Ownership. The lamp flickered violently. For a heartbeat, I thought the flame would die, but it steadied, throwing her shadow huge across the walls. After he disappeared, she continued, they took you. Said it was for protection. But it was about control. They used your name to keep the inheritance quiet. The land, the rights, the trust. The word struck something familiar. A rhythm of loss I'd heard before. She looked up at me. You were supposed to inherit the estate, but they forged the documents, created a new lineage. Linton was their invention, a name to keep the truth buried under respectability. I stumbled back a step. You're saying my whole life was a story written by someone else? Silence filled the room again. The storm had softened outside, snow now falling slower, quieter, like the sky itself was listening. I picked up the locket, the metal cold against my palm. If this is true, why now? Why bring me here? Because they're watching again. Her eyes flicked to the window. They know the frame was opened. The hairs on my arms rose. What do they want? Her mouth trembled. To finish what they started. A loud bang cut through the air, something hitting the door downstairs. Then another. Her face went pale. They're here. My pulse exploded in my ears. Who's here? She grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Listen to me. Under the floorboards in this room, take what's inside. Then go east to Husavik. Find Erik Jonsson. Tell him the frame cracked. He'll know what it means. Wait, another crash, the front door giving way. Footsteps below, fast, deliberate. She pushed me toward the corner. Go! The lamp toppled as she moved, plunging the room into darkness. Smoke curled up from the spilled oil, the faint smell of burning cloth rising. Mom? I started, but the word felt foreign, too late. Her voice came from the dark, calm and final. Run, Arya. Don't let them rewrite you again. Then the footsteps reached the stairs, and the world split open. The first thing I remember is the sound, a shattering, violent sound that didn't belong to any storm. Wood splintering, glass exploding inward. Then a man's voice, rough, commanding, too calm for the chaos. Search the upper floor. I didn't wait to hear more. Her hand pushed me toward the narrow back hallway. Go now, she hissed, her breath sharp, eyes blazing with urgency. I hesitated, one step too long. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She turned back toward the stairs. Toward them. I'll hold them. It wasn't courage in her voice. It was inevitability. The floorboards creaked under my boots as I ran down the narrow passage. Smoke was already rising, thin and acrid. The lamp oil had caught somewhere. The scent of burning wood was spreading fast. Behind me came the dull thud of footsteps, then a shout, then a crash, a body hitting something heavy. I didn't look back. At the end of the hall was another door, small and half-rotten. I shoved it open with my shoulder. Cold air tore into the corridor, a back porch, snow falling in white sheets, the sea beyond like black glass. I stumbled outside, boots slipping. The night wind slapped my face and the cold sliced straight through my coat. I could barely breathe, but I kept moving, down the steps and across the narrow path that led toward the cliffs. Behind me, the house began to glow, orange flickers leaking through the windows like veins of fire under skin. The storm had quieted just enough to let me hear the screams. Not words. Just sound. Then, silence. The wind carried the smell of burning wood and salt. I stopped, chest heaving, and turned back once. Flames were climbing fast, curling up the side of the house. For a heartbeat, I saw a figure at the window. Tall, unmoving, framed by firelight, her silhouette, and then the roof gave in. The house collapsed inward with a deep, hollow roar. Sparks rose into the snowstorm, red against white like stars dying in reverse. I ran until my lungs felt raw. The cliffs were uneven, sharp with ice. My boots slipped twice. Once I nearly fell into the darkness below. But the need to keep going, to survive, to understand, pulled me onward. Somewhere in the distance, headlights cut through the storm, faint, then gone. Whoever they were, they hadn't given up. I reached a cluster of rocks and crouched behind them, heart hammering. I pulled my gloves off with my teeth and fumbled for the thing she'd told me about, the floorboards. I hadn't lifted them, but maybe... I reached into my coat pocket. The locket was still there, cold as bone. I pressed it to my lips for a second, then opened it. The photo stared back. Me as an infant. Her holding me, the same coastline behind us. Something about the rocks ahead looked unnatural. Too even. I brushed the snow away. Beneath it, buried halfway in ice, was a trapdoor. My pulse quickened. I pried it open with a stone. The hinges screamed. Beneath was a shallow space lined with metal. Inside, a small waterproof satchel, the kind used by surveyors or divers. I dragged it out and tore it open. Inside were 3 things. A folded map, marked in red. A photograph of a man, half his face burned, standing beside excavation equipment. A USB drive sealed in plastic labeled simply, The Bay Project. My hands shook as I turned the map toward the light. The red circle marked a spot east of here, along the coast near Husavik. Her words echoed in my head. Find Erik Jonsson. Tell him the frame cracked. Thunder rolled over the sea. Somewhere far behind me, I heard engines, vehicles, maybe 2. The crunch of tires on ice. They'd found the road. I stuffed the satchel under my coat and started down the cliff path. The snow was heavier now, the wind cruel, but movement kept me alive. My fingers were numb, my breath shallow. I didn't dare use my flashlight. For a long time, the only sound was wind and my own ragged breathing. Then, faint, distant, a man calling out, Arya. Not her voice this time. This one was deeper. Familiar in a way that turned my stomach cold. I slipped behind a boulder, crouching low. The beam of a flashlight swept across the snow less than 50 meters away. Then another. 2 figures. One tall, one stockier. Both moving slow, methodical. We're not here to hurt you, one called. We just want to talk. The lie was almost kind. I pressed my hand to my mouth, forcing my breathing silent. When the lights moved farther north, I broke into a run again, keeping low. My legs burned. The satchel thumped against my ribs. Somewhere between adrenaline and exhaustion, I started to laugh, a small, broken sound. The house was gone. My mother, or whoever she was, gone. And all I had left was a map, a locket, and a promise that the truth was waiting at the end of the world. By the time I reached the coastline road, the eastern sky was turning the faintest shade of gray. Dawn. A single car passed on the horizon, a pickup, old and rust-streaked. I stepped out and waved, desperate. It slowed. The driver rolled down his window, a man in his 50s, face weathered by sea wind. Need help? He asked. I hesitated only a second. Husavik, I said. Please. He nodded, jerking a thumb toward the passenger seat. Get in. Storm's coming back. As I climbed in, the warmth of the heater hit my frozen hands. The man glanced at me once, eyes sharp. You look like you've seen a ghost. I looked out at the horizon, smoke still rising where the house had been. Maybe I did, I said quietly. He didn't ask more. The truck rumbled forward into the gray morning, snow falling harder now, the coast stretching endlessly ahead. In my pocket, the USB pressed against my skin like a pulse. Steady, insistent, alive. Whatever waited in Husavik, I knew this much, the story wasn't over. It had only just caught fire. By the time we reached Husavik, the morning had hardened into a cold, colorless light. The storm had passed, but the world still looked scraped clean. No warmth, no sound except the hiss of snow under the tires. The fisherman, his name was Bjorn, didn't ask questions. He just drove, one gloved hand on the wheel, the other holding a tin cup of coffee that smelled faintly of diesel. Every few miles he'd glance at me, then back to the road, like he was trying to decide whether I was real. When the town finally appeared, a cluster of red-roofed houses hugging the curve of the bay, it looked like a postcard forgotten by time. Smoke rose from chimneys, the harbor half frozen, fishing boats swaying in gray water. Bjorn stopped in front of a small diner, its windows fogged. "You'll find someone here who knows everyone," he said. "If your man's from around, they'll point you right." I thanked him. My voice sounded rough, foreign. Inside, the diner was warm and smelled of coffee and fried fish. A few locals sat at the counter, watching a small TV that flickered with static. No one turned when I entered, except one woman behind the counter, her hair tied in a red scarf. "You look frozen, dear," she said, sliding a mug toward me before I even asked. "Long drive?" "Something like that." I sipped the coffee. Too bitter, too perfect. Then I said, "I'm looking for someone." "Eric Janssen." Her smile faltered just a little. "Who's asking?" I hesitated, then pulled the locket from my coat and set it on the counter. "A friend of someone he used to know." The woman's eyes flicked down at the locket, then up again. Her voice dropped. "He lives out by the lighthouse. End of the East Road. You'll know it. There's nowhere else that far." "Thank you." She caught my wrist before I could leave. Her grip was soft but sure. "If he tells you to turn back," she said quietly, "listen to him." The way she said it, without curiosity, without judgment, made the hairs on my neck rise. Outside, the wind had picked up again. The town felt smaller now, the streets too quiet. I walked until I found a rusted bike leaning against a post, its owner nowhere in sight. I left a folded bill under the seat and took it. The road to the lighthouse wound along the cliffs, snow crunching under the tires. The sky hung low, the sea restless below. Every few minutes, I caught glimpses of what remained of the USB drive's label through the plastic. The Bay Project. The name pulsed in my mind like a wound. When the lighthouse finally appeared, it was less a tower than a scar of metal and concrete jutting from the coast. The light at the top still worked, sweeping pale circles across the gray water. A cabin stood nearby, weather-beaten but alive, smoke curling from the chimney. I leaned the bike against the fence and knocked. The door opened almost immediately. The man who stood there looked older than the photo I'd found in the satchel, but unmistakable. The same eyes, the same burned scar running down the left side of his face. "Aria Linton," he said, voice like gravel. "You look just like her." I froze. "You know who I am?" He nodded once, stepping aside. "Come in before they see you." Inside, the cabin was cluttered with papers, maps, and machinery. A faint hum filled the air. Old computers, hard drives, the steady beat of data being decrypted. He closed the curtains before speaking again. "She said you'd come." "I didn't believe her." I stopped myself. "The house burned. She told me to find you. She said you'd know what the frame meant." He looked at me long, searching. "The frame cracked?" "Yes," he exhaled, as if the words unlocked something heavy. Then he crossed to a desk piled with folders and pulled one open. Inside were photographs, aerial shots of the coastline, dig sites marked with red circles. "The Bay Project," he said. That's what they called it when it was still government-sanctioned. Archaeological research, supposedly. But it wasn't research. It was containment. "Containment," he nodded. "Your father, the real one, discovered an ancient structure beneath the bay. Prehistoric, older than anything we've carbon dated here. But what mattered wasn't the age. It was the symbol carved into the foundation." He handed me a photograph. A stone tablet, half submerged, covered in spirals and runes. It was the same spiral pattern from the locket's back. My breath caught. "What does it mean?" "No one knows," he said. "But when he reported it, the funding was pulled. The government erased the records, and your father disappeared 2 weeks later. Your mother, the real one, went into hiding. They didn't kill her, but they broke her life apart piece by piece." I stared at the image. "And me?" He hesitated, then spoke softly. "They took you because your father left everything. The land, the trust, the research rights, in your name. You were a child, easy to hide, easier to rename. They built a new family around you. You were raised in the lie so completely you'd never think to look behind it." The air in the cabin seemed to thicken. "Why me? Why not just destroy the documents?" He smiled without warmth. "Because they couldn't. The deeds were coded, locked inside a file that only opened with your genetic signature. Your DNA is the key." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're saying I'm the last link," he finished. to the truth they buried under the bay. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small metallic vial, sealed tight. Inside, something glowed faintly blue. Your father left this too. His final message, but you need to see it yourself. He inserted the USB into a terminal and typed a command. The screen flickered, then filled with static. A moment later, a video appeared. Grainy, old, but clear enough. A man's face filled the frame. My father. He looked tired, windburned, eyes darting as if afraid of the camera. If you're seeing this, he said, they've found me. And you, Arya, they'll come for you too. But listen carefully. What we uncovered under the bay, it isn't just history. It's proof that everything they built this country on was stolen. The feed crackled. His voice dropped. Don't trust anyone who offers to protect you. They're the ones who buried the truth. Then the screen went black. I sat there, frozen. Outside, the wind had risen again. Eric shut the terminal. Now you understand why she burned the house, he said quietly. She was covering your trail. A sound cut through the wind, the distant growl of engines. Eric went still. They found us. The sound came again, engines grinding against the wind, growing closer. Eric killed the cabin lights with a flick. Darkness swallowed the room, leaving only the rhythmic pulse of the old computer still running on backup power. The glow lit half his face, and in that thin blue light, he looked like a ghost from another war. How many? I whispered. He listened for a moment, then said, 2 vehicles. Maybe 3. Military engines, not local, my pulse stuttered. How did they find us so fast? They were already watching the bay, he said. They've been watching since the night your mother made contact. They must have traced her transmission. He moved quickly, pulling open a floor panel beneath the table. Beneath it was a metal case, sealed, rusted, heavier than it looked. He shoved it into my hands. This is everything. Files, photos, the last of the Bay Project records. If they get this, it's over. The floorboards trembled as headlights cut through the snow outside, sweeping across the frosted windows. I could see shadows moving, too precise, too coordinated. Go, Eric hissed. I'm not leaving you. He grabbed my arm. I've lived with ghosts long enough. You still have time to become something more. There's a back way down to the docks. A fishing boat named Kelda. Bjorn keeps it fueled. Tell him it's for her? Her? Your mother. The sound of boots crunched on the porch. A voice barked something in Icelandic, calm, commanding. Eric shoved me toward the back door. Go. Now. I hesitated just long enough to see him reach for the rifle leaning against the wall. Then I ran. The cold hit me like a wall of glass. The wind clawed at my face, biting through my coat as I stumbled down the icy slope behind the cabin. My breath came out in clouds, ragged, loud. I could still hear them. Men shouting, a door splintering open, the echo of gunfire. I wanted to turn back. Every instinct screamed to. But I kept moving. The path twisted down toward the docks, lit only by the weak beam of the lighthouse behind me. Each step felt like walking a knife's edge. One wrong move, and I'd vanish into the black water below. Somewhere above, an explosion cracked through the storm. The shockwave hit seconds later, snow lifting from the cliffs in a shimmering veil. The cabin, gone. I fell to my knees, gasping, the cold biting at my palms. Eric's face flashed in my mind, the scar, the calm, the certainty. Keep moving, I told myself. When I finally reached the docks, the harbor was deserted. Only a few boats rocked in the tide, their ropes creaking against wooden posts. Then I saw it, Kelda, painted in faded blue letters. Bjorn was there. Somehow he already knew. They burned the hill, he said simply, as if talking about the weather. His hands moved fast, untying ropes, starting the engine. Get in, I climbed aboard, clutching the case. We can't outrun them by sea. He gave me a look. We won't have to. The bay hides things, same as it did for your father. The boat groaned as it pushed from the dock. The water glowed faintly where the light hit it. Not reflection, but something deeper, something alive. What is that? I whispered. Bjorn didn't answer. He pointed toward the horizon. You see that ridge? Beneath it lies what they call the foundation. Your father's site. It's where it all began. The engines roared behind us. Headlights cut through the snow at the dock. The men had arrived. Black figures moving like insects on the pier. Gunfire echoed, bullets slicing into the water around us. Bjorn twisted the throttle. Hold on! The Kelda surged forward, waves slamming against its hull. I clutched the case tighter as we sped into open water, the wind screaming in my ears. The lights on shore grew smaller, then vanished entirely, swallowed by the storm. For a few minutes, there was only darkness. Then, a glow beneath the sea. It started faint, like moonlight on glass. Then it grew, spreading in wide, circular patterns. The same spiral shape from the tablet, from the locket, from every unanswered question that had haunted me since the fire. Bjorn slowed the engine. "We're here." The glow pulsed brighter. My skin prickled as if the air itself carried a charge. Bjorn pointed ahead, to the silhouette of a half-submerged structure jutting from the bay's center. "There," he said. "Your father died trying to reach it. Whatever truth he found, it's still inside." Before I could speak, something exploded behind us. The water surged, the boat tipping hard to one side. A missile had struck the waves near the dock. The agents were firing blindly into the storm. Bjorn threw me a waterproof bag. "Take the case. There's a lifeboat tied aft. Go now. They'll sink us before we reach the ridge." "What about you?" He smiled, tired, certain. "Someone has to make sure they keep looking at me, not you." I shook my head. "No, I can't." He gripped my shoulder. "You must. The world doesn't need another ghost. It needs someone who remembers." Another explosion rocked the deck. I ran to the lifeboat, clutching the case. The air burned with salt and smoke. I untied the rope with shaking hands, climbed in, and pushed off just as another blast tore through the stern. The Kelda went up in a pillar of flame. For a second, everything was light, orange, violent, and final. Then, only darkness again. The lifeboat drifted toward the center of the glowing spiral. My hands trembled as I opened the case, desperate for direction. Inside were papers, a map, and a second vial, glowing the same blue as the water beneath me. Etched on its surface were 2 words in my father's handwriting. "For area, below." The boat rocked gently as I stared down into the glowing water, the symbol pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the surface. The snow had stopped. The world was silent, and somewhere far behind me, the men on shore were still searching for a girl who no longer existed and a truth that refused to stay buried. The glow was alive. That was my first thought as I stared into the water. Not reflection, not bioluminescence, alive. The light moved like breath, rising and falling in slow, deliberate waves, as if the ocean itself was dreaming. The cold gnawed at my skin, the air tasting like metal and salt. The lifeboat drifted closer to the spiral below, drawn as if by a current I couldn't feel. I looked down and saw it, stone, massive slabs of it, etched with the same runes from the tablet, stretching outward in rings beneath the bay. In the center, a circular structure, domed, fractured, and faintly humming. The glow pulsed once more, and the water around the dome shimmered, rippling outward in concentric circles. "For Arya," my father had written. Below. The vial in my palm flickered in rhythm with the glow beneath me, as if the two recognized each other. I hesitated only a second before I sealed the case, strapped it to my chest, and rolled into the freezing water. The cold was absolute. 1,000 needles pierced my skin at once. My breath caught, my heartbeat thundered in my ears. But I kicked downward, deeper, until the lifeboat above was only a pale blur. The light guided me. It wasn't natural. It was too structured, too steady, like circuitry etched into the sea floor. As I reached the dome, my hand brushed stone smoother than it should have been. Worn not by waves, but by design. There was a narrow fissure at its base, just wide enough for me to slip through. I hesitated, lungs screaming, then pushed inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, everything changed. The water vanished. I fell, hard, onto wet stone, gasping, choking, air flooding my lungs. I was inside a chamber. The walls glowed faintly, carved with the same spiral motif, and at its center stood a glass column filled with the same blue liquid as the vial. For a long moment, I just knelt there, shaking, staring. The silence wasn't empty. It listened. Then somewhere in the chamber, a voice crackled to life. "Arya?" It was distorted, old, but human. My father's voice. I turned toward the sound. A projection flickered to life on the far wall. His face, younger, clearer than in the last recording. "If you've reached this place, it means they've failed to erase you," he said. "This is the heart of the Bay Project. Not a tomb, not a monument. It's proof. He stepped aside, revealing what lay behind him, a massive mural carved into the stone. It showed people, not primitive, not mythic, but human, standing before machines half buried in the earth. These ruins predate every civilization we know, he continued. Whoever built this, they understood energy in ways we still can't replicate. The spirals aren't symbols, they're power conduits. The light you see isn't magic, it's memory. The projection flickered again, his eyes finding the camera, finding me. They buried this because it rewrites everything. History, ownership, the illusion of progress. They built cities on stolen ground and called it civilization. The government wanted to weaponize it. Your mother and I wanted to reveal it. His voice softened. If I didn't make it, know this. They didn't steal your childhood. They borrowed time. You were always meant to finish what we started. The image froze, then dimmed. For a long time, I didn't move. The air smelled faintly of ozone and salt. The chamber hummed like a pulse. Then I noticed it, a small indentation at the base of the column, the exact shape of the vial. My heart pounded. I took it from my pocket and set it into place. The chamber reacted instantly. The blue light surged through the walls, racing through the carvings like lightning veins. The hum deepened into a vibration that shook the ground. On the ceiling, the spiral symbol rotated slowly, once, twice, and then opened. Light poured down, images flashed around me, memories not my own. Ancient cities under starlight, towers of glass and stone rising from the ocean, people working in silence beneath skies I didn't recognize. A civilization lost not to time, but to choice. And in the center of it all, the spiral again, not a symbol of power. A warning. The visions burned away as suddenly as they came. The light dimmed. I staggered, gasping, my hands trembling. On the wall beside me, new words had appeared, carved as if by unseen hands, not buried, guarded. I backed away, realization hitting me like cold water. The Bay Project hadn't been about covering up a discovery. It was about preventing one. Whatever this energy was, it hadn't been hidden for greed or control. It had been contained. The hum shifted again, louder now, urgent, almost alive. The structure was reacting to my presence, then I felt it. A tremor. The floor cracked beneath me, water seeping in through the fissures. The ocean wanted its secret back. I grabbed the case and ran for the opening, lungs burning, feet slipping on slick stone. Behind me, the chamber roared, light spilling upward in violent bursts. I dove into the water as the dome collapsed, a surge of bubbles and light swallowing everything behind me. The current carried me upward. My chest screamed for air. The blue glow followed, chasing me like a living storm. Then, surface. I broke through the water with a cry, gasping, coughing, the cold cutting like knives. The bay was alive with light, the spirals on the surface spreading outward for miles, glowing brighter and brighter until they fused into one vast pulse. And then, just as suddenly, silence. The light faded, leaving only ripples on the water, and the faint orange flicker of fire still burning on the far shore. I clung to the lifeboat, shaking, the case still in my arms. Inside, the vial's glow had vanished, but something else had awakened. I didn't know if it was in the water, or in me. All I knew was that the world would never believe what I'd seen. And yet, they would feel it, soon, because some truths don't stay buried. They surface. The first thing I noticed when I woke was silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that waits, heavy and watchful, as if the world is holding its breath. The sky above me was pale gray. The storm had passed, leaving the bay calm and glassy. My boat drifted near the shore, tangled in seaweed and ash. The case lay beside me, scorched at the edges but intact. I sat up slowly. Every muscle ached. My throat burned from salt and smoke. The world felt different. Not broken, not healed, just listening. Somewhere behind the cliffs, a helicopter thumped through the clouds. I ducked instinctively, but it didn't come closer. They were searching, yes, but not for me. Not anymore. I looked toward the horizon. The water still shimmered faintly, though the glow was gone. Beneath the surface, something vast and ancient slept again. The spiral had closed. I made it back to the mainland by morning. The harbor was empty. No guards, no search parties, just the charred remains of the dock and the faint scent of diesel. In the distance, I could still see the smoke from Eric's cabin. Or what was left of it. Every step toward it felt heavier. I reached the site just as the sun broke through the clouds. The snow there was melted, blackened. The hill that once held the cabin was now a crater, glassy at the edges, still warm. I found nothing of Eric. Not a bone, not a weapon, not a sign of struggle. Only a burned metal tag, half buried in the dirt. His initials, barely legible. I clenched it in my fist until the edges cut my skin. Someone has to remember, he'd said. So I did. Over the next few weeks, I became a ghost. I traveled south, avoiding every port tied to my name. I changed trains, changed countries, changed the way I walked. The case never left my side. At night, I'd open it and look at what was left. The charred files, the ruined photos, the fragments of the Bay's code. Useless, maybe. But there was one thing still intact, the recording of my father. I played it again and again until his voice became part of the silence around me. They built cities on stolen ground and called it civilization. Each time I heard it, I understood a little more. The Bay wasn't just a place. It was a mirror, a reminder of what power does to truth. My father had died to reveal it. My mother had tried to protect it. And I had done both. But the more I listened, the more I began to notice something new in the recording. A sound beneath his words. A rhythm. At first I thought it was static. Then I slowed it down and realized it wasn't noise at all. It was code. The same pattern as the spiral. Coordinates. Not of a single point, but of a network. There were others. I ended up in Oslo, under a false name, renting a flat that smelled of damp wood and cigarettes. From my window, I could see the frozen harbor. Quiet, still, almost kind. Some nights I dreamed of the bay, of the light beneath the water, of Eric's voice, of my father's eyes when he said proof. Other nights, I dreamed of the people who would come for me once they realized what I'd survived, but fear had become a dull ache. The kind that never leaves but no longer defines you. I began writing. Not a report, not a manifesto, a record. The truth in fragments, disguised as fiction. Names changed. Dates altered. Places blurred. If anyone ever read it, they'd call it myth. Good. Let them, because myth survives longer than truth ever does. A month later, a letter arrived with no return address. No stamps. Just my name, the real one, written in the same sharp, deliberate hand as my father's notes. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, the spiral. And beneath it, one sentence. You didn't awaken it, Arya. You answered it. No signature. For a long time, I just sat there staring at it. Then I walked down to the harbor, folded the letter, and dropped it into the sea. The water rippled once, faintly glowing where it sank. Then it was gone. I never went back to the bay. But sometimes, on cold mornings when the wind smells like salt and electricity, I see the spiral reflected in puddles or frost patterns on glass. Sometimes the streetlights flicker in rhythm. Slow, patient, like a heartbeat beneath the city. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear my father's voice again. Not in grief, not in warning, but in wonder. Not buried, guarded. The world doesn't know what sleeps beneath it. It isn't ready to. Maybe it never will be. But I am. Because when you've seen the truth, you stop being part of the surface. You become part of the silence beneath it. The kind that waits. The kind that remembers and maybe, just maybe, the kind that forgives.